Developing right now on Morning News Now, the final phase in Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial now about to unfold. This morning, the former president set to return to a New York courtroom for closing arguments. We'll bring you the latest. Also this morning, survivors picking up the pieces after severe storms slammed several states with heavy rain, damaging hail, even tornadoes.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
Devastated though, you know. I mean, this wasn't really a hit that we could take right now.
We'll take you to the area's hardest hit as officials get a first-hand look at the damage. And the threat not over. We're tracking another round of storms threatening the south. Plus, pressure and pushback over that deadly Israeli strike on a refugee camp in Rafah. This morning, Israel's prime minister calling it a tragic mistake, but vowing to continue the assault on Gaza. All this as Spain, Ireland, and Norway officially recognize a Palestinian state. We have the latest. And old habits going up in smoke. For the first time ever, more Americans are choosing marijuana over alcohol for daily use. More on the budding trend and why it could be high risk for your mental health. Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe's off this morning. Thanks for hanging with us on this day after Memorial Day. We come to you this hour with the beginning of the end of the first ever criminal trial of a former president here in New York. Closing arguments are set to start in just a few hours in former President Donald Trump's hush money trial. Jurors have sat through 6 weeks of testimony, heard from 22 witnesses, and reviewed hundreds of pieces of evidence. Soon, those 12 jurors will begin their deliberations to determine whether the former president will be held responsible for any of the 34 felony counts against him. Mr. Trump is accused of falsifying business records to cover up a scheme to pay off adult film star Stormy Daniels over an alleged affair ahead of the 2016 election. The former president denies all of these allegations. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard is outside the courthouse in Manhattan for us. Vaughn, good morning. So this is the last chance, really, for both sides, as it always goes. As someone who's been covering this trial, what do you expect to hear from the prosecution and defense today? How long do you think these closing arguments will last?
Right after 5 weeks of testimony, Savannah, this is the moment here. Closing arguments where both sides are able to make their final arguments. First up will be the defense for Donald Trump and his attorneys. We're looking at several hours for them to go and make their case to the prosecution that Donald Trump ultimately was somebody who was not intimately involved in the execution of this hush money scheme, that it was Michael Cohen who did it independent of Donald Trump. They will point to this jury and say, look, at what point do you have anybody articulating that Donald Trump ordered the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels? The only linchpin to that is Michael Cohen. Now, of course, there are the documents, the actual checks that Donald Trump signed. There are meetings, like at the White House in February 2017, when Michael Cohen visited him in the Oval Office. And Cohen says that that is where they came up and ultimately agreed to pay out those 11 checks over the course of 2017 to reimburse Michael Cohen. But again, it's Michael Cohen's word largely against Donald Trump's. And that's where you're going to have the defense articulate that there is nobody outside of Michael Cohen who should not be a trusted individual. He already pleaded guilty to federal authorities for lying under oath to not only Congress, but also FBI agents. They will also say that he has admitted that he perjured himself, that he, back in the civil fraud trial last year, that he told Alina Habba, one of the attorneys for Donald Trump, that in fact that he had actually lied to federal authorities. So again, this for the defense is going to be really trying to hold up the Michael Cohen story, whether he can be somebody trusted by the jury. On the other hand, when you're looking at the prosecution here, who will follow the defense of the closing arguments most likely this afternoon into the evening, you're going to hear the prosecution tell the jury to use common sense. That you have David Pecker, a longtime friend dating back to the 80s of Donald Trump, who oversaw the National Enquirer's publisher, say that he was called to Trump Tower in August of 2015 with Donald Trump and Michael Cohen, and that's where they hatched this catch-and-kill scheme. And it was over the course of the next year that David Pecker worked with Michael Cohen to actually execute on that. And that he will also, the prosecution will tell the jury, to look at conversations that others articulated during this testimony that Donald Trump was frustrated when Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal both went public with their stories. And this is all part of the common sense argument that the prosecution will make to the jury, saying, look, of course Donald Trump had the interest, because not only did he concoct the plan, but he was frustrated when these women's stories started becoming public. He himself articulating on his social media account that he had a non-disclosure agreement with these women, and that these women, they were violating it, and that they should be punished for violating and coming forward with their allegations.
Vaughn, thank you so much. Such a deep dive here on sort of what we've seen so far and what we expect today. Let me ask you one specific thing. After 6 weeks of trial, after what you just recapped for us, what are the biggest kind of outstanding issues, biggest questions, or anything that needs to be cleaned up sort of for either side?
Right, when we're looking at the actual falsification of the business records, Savannah, I think that that is an important element of this here, because it's going to be on the prosecution, again, to make the case that if Donald Trump is to be found guilty of each of these 34 felony counts of the falsification of business records, that Donald Trump had to have intimate knowledge that these reimbursement checks and the designation of them as legal expenses to Michael Cohen, that he was knowingly actually reimbursing him for the Stormy Daniels payment of $130,000. Because when you're looking at these felony counts, it was not actually for the hush money payment itself, but it was for the reimbursement, and then the denoting that they were not hush money payments, but they were legal expenses. And there is an underlying crime here that the prosecution is also going to have to articulate and prove to this jury. So it's a little tricky here, and the jury has heard all of this testimony, but it's now on the prosecution to actually link the hush money payment scheme, which is the underlying crime, the misdemeanor, to the actual falsification of the business records, which is the felony. And that is where the prosecution is going to have to lay out to this jury in very clear form how Donald Trump went from the hush money payment scheme in 2015-2016 to the falsification of the business records in 2017.
Vaughn, Michael Cohen really such a star witness here, and as you laid out just a moment ago, how much a lot of what he said was really linchpins here for the prosecution. He, though, as we know, has real credibility issues. Do you think that the defense did enough to get at that question, to question his credibility, to make the jury question his credibility and remember that through deliberation?
Right, there's a lot of questions coming into this, and to how Michael Cohen, as the marquee witness, would do on that stand. For 3 days, he answered questions not only from the prosecution, but of the defense. And every step of the way, he was very dispassionate, and he acknowledged his wrongdoing. He acknowledged his lying. He repeatedly said that he was loyal to Donald Trump and the Trump family, and ultimately committed these acts and these crimes because of that loyalty. And so the prosecution, before the defense could even get to him, almost pre-butted in the jury's mind who this person was. And under cross-examination, the defense tried to wrinkle Michael Cohen and almost get him to admit that he did this all on his own. But every step of the way, he said that, no, I did this because of Donald Trump. And Robert Costello, who had been somebody who had worked as a legal advisor to Michael Cohen, was actually called by the defense as a witness to them. And in many ways, they asked him about his conversations with Michael Cohen. And Robert Costello, perhaps frustrating for the defense, was not that person that really undercut his credibility. And so for the prosecution, Michael Cohen was the exact witness that they wanted and that they needed.
Vaughn, give us insight for what we might expect the rest of this week to look like. Once closing arguments are finished up, we hear those rules. What do we think about a timeline, anything like that?
Right, Donald Trump will return here to this courthouse in short order, and we're looking at closing arguments lasting throughout the day today. They could extend into Wednesday morning. At that point in time, you have jury instructions, which will be lengthy. Again, we talked about the complicating part of how these are 34 felony accounts on falsification of business records. The jury will be given very detailed instructions on what crimes have been alleged and what crimes they are going to have to find Donald Trump either not guilty or guilty of. And after that is when the jury will go into the deliberation. And it could last a matter of 1 hour, or it could last potentially days. And so we're looking at a verdict as soon as this Friday night, but it could very well go into next week.
All right, Vaughn Hilliard, as always, we appreciate your reporting. Big few days. We'll be talking to you a lot. Let's turn now to the severe weather that battered the Midwest and parts of the South over the holiday weekend. At least 24 people are now dead after the storm stretched from Texas to New England. The weekend storms brought more than 70 reported tornadoes. And those destructive systems barreled east, drenching New York City and snarling travel at some New York airports. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa has the latest.
Hey, good morning. Millions of Americans across the country once again waking up to jaw-dropping damage like this. Look at this house. Family telling us a couple in their 90s rode out a tornado here Sunday night, sitting on that bed because they couldn't make it down to their basement in time. Miraculously, family tells us they actually are okay. They survived that storm. Overall, it was a stunning holiday weekend. More than 70 reported tornadoes at this point, touching down across close to 15 states. The death count overnight rising again. We are now at 24 people total killed, 5 here in Kentucky alone. That's according to the state's governor, who said one reported twister was on the ground here in Kentucky for close to 40 miles. We also once again saw intense damage across the plains, states like Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas. The White House confirming the president was on the phone with governors overnight, promising federal help. And for context, we've been tracking this again for weeks, if not months. 2024 has been a really extreme year. We are now closing in on close to 1,000 reported tornadoes so far across the country this year, making 2024 year to date the second busiest year for tornadoes ever recorded. I'll send it back to you.
Wow. All right, Maggie, thank you so much. Well, the severe weather threat continues for the southern plains today. Angie Lassman is in studio with us with what we can expect. Hey, Angie, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning to you. And as Maggie mentioned, it's been quite a busy spring when it comes to severe weather, and we've got another round of it here today, already sparking up across parts of the southern plains this morning with some of those watches and warnings in effect. You can see the outline of the yellow. That's a thunderstorm watch. We also have thunderstorm warnings and a newly issued tornado warning near the Dallas metro area. We're going to be watching this batch of thunderstorms continue to kind of rumble to the east. Now, otherwise, most of the rain for the northeast is out of the picture. We have a couple of thunderstorms still lingering across parts of the southeast, and we'll expect some Great Lakes thunderstorms to fire up into the afternoon hours. But all of those spots aren't where we're concerned for the severe weather. That's going to be centered across the southern plains, specifically Oklahoma to Texas. We'll also see the potential for some really heavy rain along with those strongest of the storms. By the time we get into tomorrow, another line of storms sparks up across parts of the plains. We also will see some heavy rain centered across parts of the southern tier of the country, and another round of severe weather will be possible for folks in that region. Here's the deal for today as far as the severe weather is concerned. 25 million people. Where you see the orange, that's the greatest chance for some of the strongest of the storms, but it expands out into parts of the plains. Amarillo, Lubbock, down to Corpus Christi is where we'll see a good chance that extends out into Louisiana as well. But Austin, Dallas, San Angelo, those are the spots where we're most concerned for the strongest storms. And we're talking really impressive wind speeds with this. The tornado threat is low, but it's not zero, so we can't rule out 1 or 2 of those tornadoes firing up. But the strong winds up to hurricane force is possible. So over 75-mile-per-hour winds for Dallas, Waco, Del Rio, San Antonio. These are the spots where you're going to see the strongest of those winds, but we'll also have the potential for some hail, too. Looking ahead to tomorrow, it looks like the high plains will see the greatest chance for the severe weather. Places like Rapid City included in that, with all impacts on the table. The tornado risk, though, will once again remain low. As far as today is concerned with the rain, we're going to see good amounts of it falling in a short period of time. So the moderate risk for flash flooding is there, specifically for major cities like Waco, but we'll see Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, all of those same spots that we're concerned for the severe weather. We'll also see the risk for some flash flooding with anywhere from 1 inch to 3 inches, but up to 5 inches of rain possible. Again, this is going to last through Wednesday, so we already have some pretty saturated grounds for folks there, so we're concerned about that flooding as we get through at least the next couple of days. And then eventually, we're going to watch that severe weather shift to the east here over the coming days. 'Tis the season, Savannah. I mean, it's been so busy. May already having over 400 tornado reports. That's the most since 2019. We continue to break records, and we likely will see another really active couple of days.
Oh, my goodness, and just so tragic with 24 deaths involved. All right, Angie, thank you so much. Well, the criminal trial of New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez is set to resume today in Manhattan Federal Court after a week-long break. On Friday, the judge ruled that evidence of what the senator did in a legislative capacity on behalf of Egypt should be barred because as a member of Congress, it is protected by the speech and debate clause of the U.S. Constitution. Well, Menendez faces 16 criminal counts for allegedly using his position in Congress to benefit several businessmen as well as the governments of Egypt and Qatar in exchange for hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes, including bars of gold. Menendez and his co-defendants have pleaded not guilty. Well, this morning, a bipartisan group of U.S. lawmakers is continuing their visit to Taiwan. Yesterday, the delegation met with the island's new president and pledged further U.S. support amid threats from China. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles is the only broadcast network reporter traveling with the delegation, and he has the latest for us.
The message from Washington to Taipei is crystal clear. We love Taiwan. The first words from House Foreign Affairs Chairman Mike McCall to the island's new president, Lai Ching-te. Taiwan is self-governed, but China claims it as part of its territory. China reacted to Lai's swearing in by moving warships and fighter jets close to Taiwan's shores and warned American leaders not to go to Taiwan. But you came anyway. Why?
Because we support Taiwan. We support freedom and democracy against dictatorships like the one that's very close to where we're sitting right now, the People's Republic of China.
China's aggressive posture has American leaders worried. The U.S. is investing billions of dollars to fortify Taiwan's military with the goal of deterring an attack. But inside this flower market in downtown Taipei, there are little signs of anxiety, with most shoppers telling us that they are happy with the status quo. China had military exercises this week. Does that ever worry you?
Not much, because that's almost become a part of our daily life.
And it's not just national security, but economic security as well, as 90% of the world's advanced semiconductors are produced here on this island, a supply chain that would be threatened if China were to attack.
Ryan, thank you very much. Well, we are continuing to learn new details about the shocking murder of soap opera actor Johnny Wachter. Police in Los Angeles are now searching for the 3 men involved in the shooting that killed the General Hospital star. Investigators say the suspects were attempting to steal parts of Wachter's car. His family says in his final moments, Wachter saved a co-worker's life. NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky has the details.
A stunning murder in downtown Los Angeles of soap opera star Johnny Wachter. Police say they're searching for 3 suspects after the 37-year-old was fatally shot early Saturday as he encountered thieves trying to steal his car's catalytic converter.
The shooting intersection of Hope from Pico.
Wachter's family tells NBC News he was leaving a job at a downtown bar later than usual, walking with a co-worker when he noticed a man near his car. Wachter's mother said her son asked if he was about to be towed, but when a man looked up wearing a mask, Wachter shielded his co-worker with his body, and that suspect shot him.
It's just such a senseless thing.
Scarlett Wachter spoke to us by phone.
I hope that they will catch whoever did it. I hope that there will be some kind of justice for Johnny.
I want you to tell me.
Wachter was best known for his role as Brando Corbin on General Hospital, appearing in 164 episodes of the popular daytime soap. Wachter's colleagues remembering a dear friend. General Hospital posting, he was truly one of a kind. His TV wife writing, "My heart is so utterly broken. Johnny was the absolute best."
He lived life to the fullest. He always tried to be positive for everybody. He was a light in a dark room, and he will be very missed.
Our thanks to Morgan Chesky for that report. Well, there's much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, drama on the red carpet of the famed Cannes Film Festival after several confrontations caught on camera involving celebrities and a specific security guard. At first, though, after the break, emergency in Papua New Guinea. Rescuers racing against time to find survivors buried alive by a massive landslide. We'll bring you the latest when we come back. We are back with the latest on the war in Gaza this morning. Israel is showing no signs of halting its assault on Rafah, stepping up its air and land attacks on the city just days after carrying out a deadly strike on a camp for displaced Palestinians. Israel is coming under intense pressure to explain Sunday's shocking airstrike, which turned the camp into a fiery inferno and killed at least 45 Palestinians. World leaders expressed outrage and condemnation at the harrowing scenes. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu claimed it was a, quote, tragic accident aimed at targeting Hamas militants, but added that it was under investigation. Well, the attack comes as Spain, Ireland, and Norway are officially recognizing a Palestinian state today. That's a historic move they say is important to achieving peace in the Middle East.
The recognition of the state of Palestine is not only a matter of historical justice with the legitimate aspirations of the Palestine people, but it is also an imperative need to achieve peace. It is the only way to realize the solution that we all recognize as the only possible one to achieve a future of peace, that of a Palestine state that coexists alongside the state of Israel in peace and security.
NBC News International correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us from Tel Aviv. Raf, good to see you. So Israel does not appear to be backing down this morning in Rafah, despite this condemnation we're hearing. What is the latest there, and what is the Israeli explanation for Sunday's deadly strike?
Savannah, good morning. As you know, we have a team of just unbelievably courageous NBC colleagues inside of Gaza. They are our eyes and ears on the ground. And this morning, they tell us they are seeing Israeli tanks pushing into the very heart of Rafah. Now, we have not yet heard from the White House about this, but this looks like it could be a violation of President Biden's red line, which is that Israel should not mount an all-out assault on the city. And as you say, it comes just days after that deadly strike on a camp for displaced people in western Rafah. You mentioned Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday describing this as a tragic incident, saying that it will be investigated. The Israeli military says that they were targeting 2 senior Hamas leaders who were inside of that camp. They say that they hit a Hamas compound precisely, but that it then started a fire which spread throughout this camp. Savannah, you have families sleeping there in tents made of plastic, made of shelter, the flames ripping through unbelievably quickly. Our team seeing people who were burned alive in there, and Israel now facing a pretty strong global wave of condemnation. The White House, for its part, is saying the images are heartbreaking, and that while Israel has the right to pursue Hamas in Gaza, it must take measures to protect Palestinian civilians. Savannah.
Raf, walk us through the global and U.S. reaction that we're getting to this attack. I mean, because we know this came just days after the World Court had ordered Israel to immediately halt its Rafah offensive, also that there was an arrest warrant for Prime Minister Netanyahu. With all that in mind, could we see any further action? Today, for example, from the UN Security Council meeting that's happening, could anything more come of this?
So we're not expecting to see firm action from the UN Security Council later today. As you remember, Savannah, the Security Council deadlocked for months and months and months about even a resolution calling for a ceasefire, calling for the immediate release of hostages. We're here in Tel Aviv's Hostage Square right now. People are just desperate for ceasefire to negotiations to restart this week. We have seen protesters on the streets of New York, LA, Beirut, Tunis, Paris, around the world, people really, really animated by these scenes of horror coming out of Rafah. And as you said, this comes at a moment when Israel is really under the microscope internationally, with the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court calling for the arrest of both Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israel's defense minister, as well as 3 senior leaders of Hamas, and the International Court of Justice ordering Israel in a binding ruling to halt its offensive in Rafah. Israel at this point giving no indication it's going to comply with that ruling. Savannah.
Raf, as I mentioned before we came to you, Spain, Ireland, and Norway are formally recognizing a Palestinian state today. We heard a little bit of that. Talk to us about the significance of that moment and what we're hearing from those countries.
So these are 3 more American allies in Europe saying that they are not prepared to wait, that they believe, as the U.S. does, that the 2-state solution is the best path to sustainable peace between Israel and the Palestinians. But whereas the U.S. thinks a Palestinian state can only emerge out of direct peace negotiations with Israel, these European countries, Ireland, Norway, and Spain, are saying that peace talks seem to be going nowhere, and the best way of even preserving preserving the possibility of a two-state solution is to go ahead and to recognize an independent state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel. Savannah.
All right, Raph, as always, thank you very much. Well, let's stay with news overseas. This time, let's go to the race against time to find survivors after a massive landslide in Papua New Guinea. Recovery efforts in a remote, mountainous part of the South Pacific island nation are underway, but they are extremely challenging. The government estimates the death toll could pass 2,000. Some of the debris is estimated to reach more than 2 stories high. NBC News international correspondent Kelly Cobeya joins us now with the latest on this tragic story. Kelly, good morning. What is the latest on search and rescue operations?
Well, those search and rescue operations continue, Savannah, but one UN official says the hopes are diminishing of finding anyone alive. Another saying that this is not a rescue mission anymore, that it is a recovery mission. Now, one item of heavy machinery did reach the area over the weekend. It was donated by a local building company, a local developing company, and it's simply one digger. And the problem really with this disaster is that the land is still moving. It's an extremely unstable and dangerous environment for heavy machinery. What we've been seeing over the past several days are just local villagers using shovels, sticks, and farming equipment to try to dig through that several feet, in some cases, of debris. And, you know, in some cases, they're also trying to move boulders, some boulders described as being as big as cars. So a really difficult area to search and to perform any sort of rescue operation without that heavy equipment. In addition to those problems, there are no phone communications out there. A huge section of the main highway leading to those villages has been cut off by the landslide as well. So the area is only accessible really by helicopter. Now, the government did ask for more international help on Sunday, but there's yet another factor here. It's really tough to get in and out of that area or even to stay in that area for international aid workers because of tribal fighting. Aid workers have to be escorted by the military into the area and back out again. So a very, very difficult search and rescue operation, Savannah.
Kelly, our viewers can see on our screen right now the words along the bottom of the screen. We say more than 2,000 people feared dead in landslide, but the United Nations is estimating the number of people killed around 670. Why are those numbers so off?
So that 2,000 number actually showed up in a letter written by the acting disaster management head for Papua New Guinea to the United Nations on Sunday. Associated Press received a copy of that letter, and in it he said that more than 2,000 people were buried alive in the landslide. The problem is there's no clear figure on how many people were living there in the first place. The last census in the area was 24 years ago. There's been a lot of movement of people in that area since, in part because of a gold mine that is in the area, people trying to take advantage of that, as well as just displacement because of that tribal fighting. So it's difficult to get a handle on how many people were there when that landslide happened in the early hours of Friday, 3 o'clock in the morning, when most people were sleeping, if not all. Savannah.
Kelly, I understand there are concerns that a second landslide could happen. Is there anything that can be done to prepare in case it does, or even try to prevent it?
Yeah, so there's been more heavy rain, torrential rains in the area. One official describing his biggest worry is weather, weather, weather. They say there is water flowing underneath the debris because of all that rainfall. There's been heavy rain for weeks over Papua New Guinea. The debris and bodies buried under the debris are causing the land to continue moving. There are reports of rocks still falling, of trees falling, and a real danger of another landslip, if not a massive landslide. Again, it's one of the reasons it's so dangerous for rescue workers and also dangerous for the locals there. The government and aid workers are trying to evacuate several thousand people right now from neighboring villages, and also trying to find a way to get those survivors from the area so that they at least are safe. Savannah.
Kelly Cobeya, thank you very much for your reporting here. Well, coming up, it is a sure sign of a busy summer. Memorial Day weekend bringing out a record number of travelers at the airports and on the roads. What it could mean for your summer vacation plans. Plus, remembering a legend, the touching tributes to NBA Hall of Famer Bill Walton as we look back at his incredible career. This is Morning News Now. Welcome back. Now that Memorial Day weekend is over, millions of Americans are making their way home. It was a record-breaking holiday weekend for travel, signaling a busy summer season ahead. NBC News correspondent Priya Sridhar has more on that from the world's busiest airport in Atlanta. Priya, good morning.
Good morning, Savannah. As millions are returning home from their Memorial Day weekend travel destinations, Americans are now gearing up for what's expected to be a very busy summer travel season ahead.
Americans taking to the skies in record-setting numbers over the holiday weekend, signaling a busy summer travel season ahead.
We were worried about traveling on it because there's so many people traveling today.
In fact, 5 of the busiest travel days ever, all occurring this month, according to the TSA. Along with delays and cancellations along the East Coast, some scares in the sky. This United Airlines aircraft engine catching fire Monday, causing delays at Chicago O'Hare Airport. And passengers on a Spirit Airlines flight told to put on their life vests on a trip from Jamaica to Florida this weekend. The airline saying it was out of an abundance of caution, and the plane returned to Jamaica safely. But the majority of Americans, more than 38 million, opting to hit the roads over the holiday weekend, the most for Memorial Day since AAA began tracking in 2000.
It's been okay. There was an accident that slowed things down, but other than that, 95, which is notoriously bad, has been good.
Now, experts say the blockbuster Memorial Day numbers indicate a strong outlook for the summer travel season ahead.
With this busy Memorial Day now in the rearview mirror, we have summer to look forward to, and there is no doubt in our minds that this summer is likely to see more record-breaking days when it comes to travel.
For many, this weekend serving as a good omen for summer.
And if you're thinking about booking a summer vacation, but you haven't done so just yet, our friends over at Going.com say you may want to target the last 2 weeks of August. That's when you could get some good deals. The middle of July, however, not so much. That is considered prime time. Savannah?
All right, Priya, thank you so much. Well, now it is time for our weekly mental health check-in. This morning, we're talking about the mental health implications of regular cannabis use overtaking alcohol use, plus a closer look at new research that suggests mental health issues could potentially be contagious. Psychotherapist Dr. Robbie Ludwig joins us now to break down these headlines. Dr. Robbie, always good to see you. Thanks for being here. So let's jump right in to talk about that cannabis use one. So daily cannabis use now overtaking alcohol. So specifically, we should say this is about what's called high frequency use by Americans, not total consumption. But cannabis is used to deal with mental health challenges, right? But there are also a lot of mental health concerns on the other hand. Walk us through this.
Yeah, so they have seen a rise in cannabis use since the 90s, and they think in part this is because it's been legalized and considered a less dangerous drug. But this is really a misconception. So they've done studies and found that with regular cannabis use amongst 25-year-olds and under could increase the risk of having psychotic disorders, even schizophrenia, which is really quite striking and concerning. For those who are 65 and over, a Canadian study found that there was poisoning as a result of cannabis use. It can be addictive, and for those who use it on a regular basis, can be at risk for having a stroke or heart attack.
Let's turn to an 18-year study out of Finland. So this is super interesting. This is about how having a classmate who is experiencing mental illness, that can increase a teen's chance of being diagnosed themselves later in life. I mean, talk to us about this one. It makes it sound, I used the words a minute ago, as if it's like something that's contagious or something that is influenced in some ways. What do you make of this study? I know there's still some questions and experts sort of warn, have some sort of asterisks around it, but what are some takeaways from this to help people be more healthy?
Well, this was a huge study in Finland, and it looked at over 700,000 ninth graders. And they found that with more kids in the class who suffered with a mental illness, that it could increase the rate of having a diagnosis oneself. And the people who did the study said, listen, this is not causal, but just something to look at. And specifically the disorders that were raised were mood disorders, anxiety disorders, and eating disorders. And there is something called a social contagion, especially amongst teens and peers. So So it's just to really look at, do peers really influence us in multiple ways? Is it just, that these disorders are normalized so kids feel more comfortable talking about it? But it does provide kind of this idea of, group treatment for peers to kind of influence each other in a positive way in terms of maybe some type of group treatment. And it is something of note because human beings do affect one another, and it's just good to be aware of to see if there's any interventions that should be made.
Absolutely. Okay, finally, we all, I think we like to eat what we like to eat. Sometimes we don't experiment very much. Maybe you kind of eat the same thing every day, every breakfast or something like that. But this is actually, there's a term, and of course it's getting popular online, so we want to ask about it for people with ADD or ADHD. It can become something called hyperfixation meals. How can we spot the difference here? Is this something bad? What does this mean?
Well, it's something to be aware of, and it can be concerning. So with ADHD, this hyperfixation on certain foods, and very often it's comfort foods, is to kind of feel stimulated, get that dopamine high. And what this can look like is, fixating on comfort foods and not eating anything else. So there's an increased risk of some type of malnutrition. It could look like eating in the middle of the night because you have to eat that one thing that you're fixated on. It can interfere with lifestyle if someone refuses to go out with friends, let's say, or attend family events because they need their food in one particular way and to eat it a certain way. And there is this relationship between ADHD and hyperfixation, and they think it's because it's just easier not to make a choice, right? You don't have to think about what you're going to eat, and you just eat the same thing all the time. So more studies need to be done, but they look at therapy as a possible cure.
Dr. Robbie Ludwig, always great to have you with us. Really cool, important information today. Thank you. And the growing competition between American fast food restaurants and their Chinese counterparts, and just how much it's eating into profits. This is Morning News Now. Our CNBC Money Minute with the latest financial headlines. Elon Musk's AI startup scored a major bump in its funding. CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and more. Hey, Silvana.
Hey, Savannah, good morning to you. Yes, so Elon Musk's AI startup has raised $6 billion in a new round of funding. That gives xAI a market valuation of about $24 billion, according to the company. Now, investors in this latest round include venture capital firms Andreessen Horowitz and Sequoia Capital, which have also invested in OpenAI. Musk reportedly wants to use the funding to create a new supercomputer to run and train Grok. That's the AI chatbot integrated into X. iPhone users may get AI-generated emojis and more customizable apps when Apple launches iOS 18 later this year. Bloomberg reports those are among the features Apple will show off at its annual developers conference next month. Apple is reportedly developing software that can create custom emojis on the fly based on what users are texting. Users will also get the ability to change the color of app icons and arrange things more easily rather than being locked into the grid layout. And the hamburger is arguably the most celebrated main dish in the U.S., and you can chomp down on some deals today, which is National Hamburger Day. It also coincides with Burger King's 70th birthday, so the chain has offers all week long through its Royal Perks loyalty program. That includes a free hamburger today with the purchase of 70 cents or more. Wendy's customers can get a junior bacon cheeseburger for 1 cent with any purchase today through Sunday. And at Smashburger, you can get $5 classic single burgers all day long, Savannah.
Wow, I didn't realize it was a holiday, National Hamburger Day.
Me either.
All right, Silvana.
I must celebrate.
There you go. Ditto. Thank you so much. American fast food companies are facing stiff competition in China, with some Chinese companies offering similar products to their U.S. counterparts for less than half the cost. Well, now big chains like Starbucks, McDonald's, and KFC are feeling the pinch. Here's CNBC senior correspondent Eunice Yoon.
With the economy down and the job market so uncertain, China's consumers are cutting back. And the talk is that this fast food chain, Tastian, has the best menu for anyone down on their luck. Let's go inside.
This chain has been around for a while, but in 2020, it started selling Chinese burgers, becoming a direct competitor to American brands. Tastian now has more than 6,100 stores, on par with McDonald's in China and 4 times as many as Burger King here. What's Tastian's special sauce?
The reason this place is so popular is because it's insanely cheap. The top-selling set meal here of a burger, fries, and drink costs $2.60. A similar meal at McDonald's sets you back $4.60.
Starbucks is struggling to fend off fierce local competition, too. China's Luckin Coffee sells a latte for as little as $1.80, 60% less than Starbucks. Luckin last year expanded to double the number of Starbucks stores in this country.
Another popular chain here is this boba and ice cream place called Mise Bingtang.
Teas go for $1. The chocolate sundae, 80 cents. Prices pressuring Starbucks, McDonald's, and KFC's latest move to compete here, standalone K-Coffee cafes. Though the shift to local brands is largely due to price, another factor is rising nationalism. Burger joint Tastian stresses its Chinese roots as part of its sales pitch. Its slogan, Chinese stomachs love Chinese burgers.
Here, you could get a chicken neck on a stick or try a date-flavored black rice drink.
And don't forget the Peking roast duck patty on a northern Chinese street food style sesame seed bun. This taste is better for Chinese, this customer tells us. A trend already eating into profits of U.S. fast food giants. Eunice Yoon, NBC News, Beijing.
Our thanks to CNBC's Eunice Yoon for that. Well, coming up, an inspirational story about seeing past your obstacles. We'll introduce you to a local skateboarding legend whose journey was anything but kick, push, and coast. This is Morning News Now. Welcome back. We're going to end this hour with the story of one California man who has become a local skateboarding legend despite being legally blind. NBC News Now anchor Gotti Schwartz spent the day with Chad Rivera to find out how he's inspiring the people around him.
In Southern California, there's an old school skateboarder that is so respected the bowl's clear as soon as he rolls up. And yes, this is a blind mobility stick. And that is a board, and if you're thinking, wait a minute, hold on, I don't know about this, well, don't worry. Because this is just the beginning of the legend of Chad Rivera.
Made it. When it comes to the skate park, you don't see the skate park, you feel the skate park.
Yeah, but I essentially like the ball because I kind of like to get my groove. And it has that, I get that rush of, at first, when I first do my first couple of drop-ins, because I don't really see it. Every drop-in's always a little weird at first, but then I make it and then I find my groove.
Chad is 56 years old and legally blind. He lost his sight while waiting at a stoplight 34 years ago because of a rare genetic disease called Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy.
It causes all my optic nerves to die off, which is no actual blood flow in the optic nerve anymore.
While he's never been able to drive a car since, he can still kind of make out shadows and shapes, sort of like this.
Like on a cooler day when we train real hard in that foggy window, I have no clarity.
Chad is magical. I tell him, I go like, you can do everything as good or better than I do, except drive a car. That's it. I mean, and I've spent so much time with him that I'm not even aware that his sight is limited. I always say that Chad Rivera is no excuses.
Oh! If you hang out with him enough, his believe you can do anything attitude gets contagious.
For your fight stance, make sure your back foot's planted.
Okay. Look at this. Look at how steep that is. We're not going to do that. Here. Yeah. This is yours. We will let you do this. I feel like hanging out with you for more than a day would end me in the hospital.
All right, while I got too scared to drop into that bowl, I figured I'd try dropping in on another of Chad's favorite pastimes. And this one's a lot closer to the ground. Turns out jiu-jitsu is how Chad starts his days as an instructor at Surf Fight in Del Mar.
The grip makes a natural wrinkle right there for you to grab. Now I just got it.
For him, a black belt, teaching is all about what you can feel and what you can adapt to. two things in which Chad is a true master.
Jiu-jitsu, like, it just does seem like the great equalizer. Before I was put in for a peace of mind, and now I get to help people get a peace of mind. It was just kind of cool. I didn't think I'd be instructing.
And when it comes to what his students see, an unbeatable joy for life and the kind of man they want to be.
He just lives a healthy lifestyle, and it kind of puts into perspective for me, like, I want to grow up, be like Chad.
So whether he taps you out or you get a chance to spot him on his board, his vibe is liberating.
I almost forget about having a vision issue because I can do something at an upper level that not even the average Joe can do.
Feels like freedom.
Yeah.
What an incredible story. Our thanks to Gotti Schwartz for that. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now. Stay with us. The news continues right now. Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks for joining us this Tuesday. Joe is off today. Right now on Morning News Now, the final stretch. Former President Trump is back in court this morning for closing arguments in his historic hush money trial. The prosecution and defense set to make their final pitches to the jury. We're looking back at the major moments of the trial and what we can expect from each side before jury deliberations. Also this morning, a holiday weekend washout, another round of severe weather and deadly tornadoes tearing through several states from Texas to New England. The violent storms killing at least 24 people and devastating towns in multiple states. And it's not over. The risk for severe weather continues today. We'll have your forecast. Plus, a new warning as beach season kicks off for the summer. There's growing concern over safety at the shore amid a slight uptick in shark attacks and fatalities. What you need to know before heading into the water. And the summer blockbuster season is off to a sluggish start, with films seeing the worst Memorial Day weekend opening in decades. So what's behind the lackluster ticket sales, and can Hollywood bounce back? Thanks again for joining us on this day after a holiday. We begin this hour with former President Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial. After weeks of legal drama, closing arguments are set to begin this morning. After that, the 7 men and 5 women on the jury will face the question of whether or not to convict in the first ever prosecution of a former president in the history of the United States. Mr. Trump faces 34 felony counts of falsifying business records related to alleged hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels ahead of the 2016 election. He has denied all of the allegations, as well as an affair with Ms. Daniels. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett has more on what we can expect this morning.
Hey there, good morning. It is a make or break moment, a chance for both sides to tell the jury a story they'll carry with them into deliberations soon. The basic facts of this case largely not in dispute, but whether those facts add up to a crime soon in the hands of 12 New Yorkers.
This morning, former President Trump back in court as the prosecution and defense make their closing arguments to the jury of 7 men and 5 women. The state tasked today with tying together the sprawling threads left hanging from more than 20 witnesses over the last 6 weeks. Witnesses like tabloid mogul David Pecker, who described a plan to catch and kill stories that could hurt Mr. Trump's election chances. Prosecutors expected to highlight Mr. Trump himself on tape, discussing how to structure at least one alleged payoff.
What financing?
Former Trump aide Hope Hicks explaining the fallout over the Access Hollywood tape caused a scramble to suppress any stories that could damage Mr. Trump's standing with female voters. But only one witness, Michael Cohen, directly connecting a plot to buy the silence of Stormy Daniels to the alleged crime of doctoring business records. The jury hearing the former fixer drew on a home equity loan to pay the porn star $130,000 on the eve of the 2016 election. Cohen testifying he did it at Mr. Trump's direction, and then the former president approved a bogus reimbursement plan.
It's a persecution, not a prosecution of any legitimacy.
But the defense has tried to sow seeds of reasonable doubt and discredit Mr. Trump's now disbarred lawyer as a prolific liar out for revenge, using his own words.
You better believe I want this man to go down and rot inside for what he did to me and my family.
The crux of the case surrounding reams of invoices, ledger entries, and checks bearing Mr. Trump's signature, all falsified, according to prosecutors, to conceal Mr. Trump's true effort to subvert the election. But the defense argues there was no crime. These are merely 34 pieces of paper, not false records.
After After closing arguments today, then the jury will be instructed on the law, and then they will begin their deliberations. Back to you guys.
All right, Laura, thank you so much. For more on this, I'm joined by NBC News legal analyst Angela Sanadella. Angela, thanks as always for being here. What can we expect today? What are you watching out for?
Good morning, Savannah. So we are going to see a lot of outrage today from both sides. And this is why I say this. So the closing arguments are a time when you can't present new facts. But prosecutors and defense attorneys have wide discretion and latitude to go after the other side, to claim that these inconsistencies that the other side has provided are so big that it makes the other side lose the case. So in the opening statements, they have to be pretty careful about what they say. But in the closing statements, they can make lots of inferences, lots of claims, and really just say that the other side is lying. So both sides agree on a very limited set of facts, that this amount of money was given from Cohen to Keith Davidson to Stormy Daniels. But beyond that, both sides are arguing about who was behind it all. Was it Cohen, as the defense is claiming, or was it Donald Trump, as the prosecution is claiming? That's what both sides are going to be hammering down today.
As an attorney, what are you watching out for as you're giving closing arguments, as you're kind of watching the jury?
So it's very different closing arguments versus any other part of the trial, because they are looking directly at the jurors and they are using their best oratorical skills to try to pivot based on what reflections they see in body language and in how they're reacting. So when they are questioning a witness, for example, it's almost like they're doing a performance with the jurors just sitting there, but they try not to look too much at the jurors. If they do so, it kind of breaks the rhythm, the cadence, etc. But now they are looking straight at the jurors. And you get a wide spectrum of responses. Some jurors think that the attorneys are looking too much to them, mansplaining to them, or just trying to be too direct. Other jurors like that. So a lot of this is much more about human interaction and about how likable these attorneys are, Savannah.
How much of a focus do you think Michael Cohen's testimony will be today?
So quite a bit. I think far less, though, from the prosecution than from the defense. So I think the prosecutors today will be saying that whether or not you believe Michael Cohen, first of all, you can infer intent to get a conviction, meaning that you don't need someone up there saying that they know for certain that Donald J. Trump is the one who is behind all this. You can piece all of the evidence together. And second, as I've said the whole time, that there are so many other pieces of evidence that back it up. The corroboration, the fact that he even signed the checks himself could even in itself be enough of an inference. That's what the prosecutors are going to say. But then we know, of course, the defense is going to go wild, and they're going to say there's only one person who has ever put Donald J. Trump in that room, and that is Michael Cohen. Now that we know he's a liar based on not even just his past lies, but seemingly having even lied on the stand and admitting that he stole money from Donald Trump himself. So they're going to say there's only one piece that you must believe to go for the prosecution. Because that one piece is a lie, it's all done.
For an attorney, are closing arguments nerve-wracking, emotional? Is this the toughest part?
It's by far the toughest part, because it's where you link it all together and it's where everything can be lost in one. Now, I certainly think it depends on what the facts of the case are at the time. This is a case where there's two totally different narratives, and it's up to the jury's interpretation to what they believe. So in this case, the persuasive element is going to be everything. I think there's other cases where the facts speak for themselves, but in this case, there's a limited set of facts that they agree upon, and it's all just going to be oratory skills, Savannah.
Wow. What does the rest of the week look like? How long do you think closing arguments take? And then what does this mean when it gets handed over to the jury?
So I expect that closing arguments will likely finish today. They could bleed a bit into tomorrow. And then, of course, the all-important jury instructions, where the judge will tell the jury the exact legal standard that they have to use to decide on an acquittal or a conviction. And then the jurors will take those questions and go back to their room and decide on whether or not they all agree one way or the other. They will likely have some questions. They can bring those questions to the judge. But then beyond that, it's all up to them.
Angela Sanadella, fascinating. A big few days. We'll be talking a lot. Thank you so much for being here. Well, now let's turn to an election in Ohio. This November, Ohio is expected once again to be a key battleground state. But as things currently stand, get this, President Biden is not on the ballot there. This is because the state's laws require presidential nominees to be certified 90 days before the election. Well, the Democratic National Convention will miss that deadline. So later today, the state's Republican governor is holding what's called a special session to fix that problem, or try to. He had this to say during a press conference last week.
This is simply unacceptable.
Ohio is running out of time to get Joe Biden, the sitting president of the United States, on the ballot this fall. Failing to do so is simply not acceptable. This is a ridiculous, this is an absurd situation.
NBC News 2024 campaign embed and former member of this team, Emma Barnett, joins me for more on this. Emma, good morning. Great to see you. So explain how an issue as seemingly simple as this hasn't been resolved yet.
Yeah, Savannah, it is seemingly simple. So just for some context here, this has happened before in Ohio back in 2012 and in 2016. And normally it would just require a simple legislative fix. In fact, in Alabama this year, the same thing is happening there. And they passed a simple legislative fix to make sure that Biden would be on the ballot. But there's lots of politics involved here in Ohio. So some Republicans have made it clear from the very beginning that they're not going to pass any fix unless they get something in return. And what they want in return is legislation that would prohibit campaign spending by foreign nationals. Now, most Democrats would agree with that at the surface level, but as one Democratic source told me, that's the headline. Foreign money is the headline, but the subtext in a lot of the legislation that was proposed is that they want to make it more difficult for citizen-led ballot initiatives to get on the ballot in Ohio. And if you remember, back in August of 2023, just last year, a citizen-led ballot initiative is what ultimately led to the codification of abortion rights here in Ohio. So now what's happening is even more complicated because there's a lot of GOP infighting here in Ohio that stems back to a speaker's race at the beginning of the year. So all of this is coming crashing down to the simple question of how do you get Biden on the ballot in what should be a really easy fix. Savannah?
So fascinating. What can we expect to see in this special session today? Are Ohio lawmakers obligated to come to a decision under the special session? Does this mean this is settled today for sure?
It most likely will not be settled today, Savannah, and they are not obligated necessarily to come to a decision under this special session. In fact, they can call it done and go back to regular session if it ends up being a no-go to creating a simple fix or a fix that includes putting Biden on the ballot and this foreign money as well. But what's also going to happen here is the House today is going to be introducing language at the beginning of their hearing to try and get something passed. But there's going to be no votes until Thursday because according to the Constitution, you have to let this legislation sit for at least 3 days before anything's even voted on, Savannah.
Emma, what happens if state legislators don't get this issue resolved? Are there other options? I mean, what about just the DNC themselves? Is there a way that on that end of things that they can avoid not having the president on the ballot for November?
Yes, Savannah. So if the state legislature does not get anything fixed, they're going to end this special session and move on. But the DNC can do something. In fact, the DNC could do something today if they wanted to, which is essentially file a lawsuit, hold a mini convention before August 7th, which is that deadline here in Ohio, and all would be said and done. But the DNC does not want to bend the knee to Republicans who are pushing and making this more difficult. So there's just a lot of politics involved here, Savannah.
All right. Well, you think that they definitely want their candidate on the ballot, though. Emma Barnett, thank you very much. Great to see you. Well, turning now to the severe weather that plagued many states over Memorial Day. This morning, the threat of another round of wild weather is returning to the southern plains. It comes after devastating storms tore across the region over the holiday weekend, leaving multiple deaths in their wake. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa joins us now from Dawson Springs, Kentucky with the latest. Maggie, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning. You might be able, by the way, to hear some heavy machinery behind us. The cleanup is just barely beginning this morning after millions of Americans across the country sadly woke up again to damage like this. I mean, look at this house. This is insane. And even more insane, family tell us a couple in their 90s rode out a tornado sitting on that bed after they couldn't make it down to their basement in time. Miraculously, they are okay, having survived this latest round of violent spring weather.
Storms washing through the Northeast overnight, capping a Memorial Day weekend of wild weather.
The car is shaking.
With more than 70 reported tornadoes touching down across nearly 15 states since Friday afternoon, leaving at least 24 people dead.
My mom came in and told me that we had to go bunker down.
The governor saying 5 were killed in Kentucky alone after multiple reported twisters plowed through that state Sunday night.
When it hit the floors, you could just feel the floors just wave Cali up and down.
Dawson Springs, southwest of Louisville, decimated. From above, you can see home after home shredded. 17-year-old Emma Costco took cover with her boyfriend's family in their basement, hearing the tornado's suction pull doors and drain pipes.
We go upstairs. There's nothing left, really.
Upstairs was like gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
The family's grandparents sat on their bed in this nearby home, torn to pieces. Miraculously, they survived. This morning, people are also picking up the pieces in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Valley View, Texas, where video shows an apparent tornado mangling this gas station with winds up to 140 miles per hour.
As we're running, the windows exploded around us.
The building torn apart as terrified customers took cover in bathrooms.
The powerful force was just crazy.
Hard-hit communities hoping for a break as they try to piece shattered lives back together.
Yeah, and this is one of the latest rounds of communities. And of course, we know to that point, 2024 has been a really violent spring. Going by the numbers we confirmed this morning, Savannah, passed 1,000 reported tornadoes so far this year, making this the second busiest start to a year for tornadoes ever recorded. I'll send it back to you.
All right, Maggie Vespa, thank you so much. Well, let's bring in NBC News meteorologist Angie Lastman. She's tracking this severe weather threat for us this morning. Hi, Angie. What are you watching?
Hi, Savannah. Good morning to you. Watching, no surprise, more severe weather. Specifically, we already have some of these watches and warnings that have gone into effect and continue to leave us with some rough weather in the Dallas metro area. We've had reports of wind gusts over 70 miles per hour, clocking in around 75 miles per hour from DFW. So it tells you just how robust this thunderstorm is. No surprise that there's tornado warnings associated with it. So we'll be watching that batch of storms continue to work its way to the east here over the next couple of hours. Meanwhile, we've got a line of thunderstorms kind of offshore for the southeast, a few of those lingering across parts of northern Florida. All of that rain that we were tracking across New England is continuing to get out of the picture. We do have some leftover kind of unsettled weather that's going to impact folks in the Great Lakes region here through the day today. That's not what we're expecting to be severe. Instead, it's the plains, the southern plains, specifically Texas and Oklahoma, where we'll have that greatest threat for severe weather later today. If you're looking ahead to tomorrow, another line of thunderstorms expected to pop up across parts of the plains. We'll also see some kind of a rainy forecast work into parts of the south, and that'll leave us with some flooding concerns for folks there. But this is what I want you to really pay attention to, the 25 million people included in the severe risk today. We've got Oklahoma and Texas taking the brunt of that, but notice it extends out into parts of Louisiana, and we're looking at the really destructive wind gusts, strong wind gusts. We've already seen some indications of that so far this morning, and we also have the potential for some large hail. We have already had reports of hail in that region too. The tornado threat is on the lower end today, but it's not zero, so we always say there still could be possibly one or two of those that develop, so you're going to want to have a way to get those alerts. Here's the area that we're watching for the strongest wind gusts, where you see those kind of diagonal lines, 75 mile per hour wind gusts or greater, hurricane force winds or greater. Dallas, Waco, San Antonio, all included in that here as we get through the day today. Looking ahead tomorrow, of course, more severe weather. The tornado risk once again low, but it's parts of the plains that will see strong winds and hail to be upwards of an inch in size. The flash flood risk today, it's there still, specifically across parts of Texas, Waco right in the middle of that, Dallas, Brady, though, San Antonio, all included in the potential for us to see some flash flooding with some good rain working through Oklahoma City and Amarillo included in that as well. Here's those rainfall totals as we get through midweek. Localized amounts up to 5 inches. That's not the widespread amount that I think we'll see, but there could be some spots that pick up 5 inches in a short amount of time, so we'll watch for the flooding concern to last into Wednesday as well. Big picture look, here's today. The summertime highs are in place for parts of the Southwest. Looks great there. We've got warm temperatures across parts of the Southeast. That doesn't last, though. We're going to see kind of a bit of a cool down happening for parts of the Midwest. Notice those cooler highs highs into the low 70s, topping out into the upper 60s for some spots. The storms that I mentioned for parts of the plains as we get through Wednesday, and then Thursday and Friday, we'll see kind of the bookends of the country looking quite nice with a mix of some sun and clouds and pleasant conditions, Savannah. But the middle of the country, no surprise, more kind of unsettled weather for them.
Yeah. Oh, God, we've seen a lot of it. All right, Angie, thank you so much. Well, this morning, Israel is stepping up its attacks on Rafah despite mounting global outrage over Sunday's deadly airstrike that killed dozens of Palestinians who were sheltering in a camp for displaced people. Israel's prime minister called it a tragic accident, but many world leaders are now urging Israel to abide by the World Court's order to halt the assault on Rafah. NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us from Tel Aviv. Hi, Raf. Good morning.
Savannah, good morning. Our NBC News crew in Gaza has just confirmed Israeli tanks have now pushed into the heart of Rafah. There's not yet been any comment from the White House, but this could be a violation of President Biden's red line that Israel should not mount an all-out assault on the city. And it comes just days after that deadly Israeli strike on a camp for displaced people.
This morning, new fallout after that deadly Israeli strike in Rafah over the weekend. An Israeli official tells NBC News it appears that an IDF bomb ignited a gas tank at the tent camp, sending flames ripping through the site as displaced families slept in shelters made of wood and plastic. At least 45 people were killed, according to the emergency services in Hamas-run Gaza. Many of them women and children. Hundreds more wounded. These three brothers lost their only sister. They say she was 7 months pregnant. The IDF said the strike killed 2 senior Hamas commanders. But amid international criticism, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calling it a tragic incident and promising an investigation, though giving no sign he'll halt the military offensive in Rafah. The White House says the images are heartbreaking, adding Israel must take every precaution possible to protect civilians. The death toll in Rafah bringing protesters onto the streets. From New York to Los Angeles to Paris, where demonstrators clashed with police. Many of the families at the Rafah camp had been displaced several times already by the fighting, but were still unable to outrun the war. Why did those innocent people die? What was their guilt, this woman asks. Now they're packing up their tents once again and preparing to move on.
And the UN Security Council will meet later on today about that Rafah strike. The UN estimates around 1 million Palestinian civilians have been displaced by the fighting so far. Here in Tel Aviv's Hostage Square, people are hoping that negotiations may resume as early as this week on talks to bring the hostages home. Savannah.
All right, Raf, thank you very much. Coming up, a growing threat from China, how a potential Chinese invasion of Taiwan could start a hot war between the U.S. and China. Plus, we've got a case of the summer box office blues. Can the movie industry bounce back from the worst Memorial Day weekend showing in decades? We have a media analyst weighing in. Welcome back. As Taiwan faces an ongoing threat from China, some experts say any potential invasion may happen quicker than expected. NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney looks at how China could carry out the operation and what the implications might be.
These striking images of Chinese warships off the coast of Taiwan this month, a dire warning of a potential invasion that could disrupt the global technology supply chain, plunge the world into an economic catastrophe, and start a hot war between the U.S. and China. And according to one geopolitics expert, an actual invasion could be over before the U.S. even has a chance to respond.
So a lot of people assume that this would be sort of a Normandy type of beach landing. The reality is that terrain does not allow it.
Dmitry Alperovich predicted the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and now in a new book, he lays out how China could seize Taiwan. First, he says, the Chinese would mount a lightning-fast assault from the air and the sea.
You're still going to move amphibious assault ships across the strait. Each of them can deliver about 800 troops and, more importantly, dozens of troop transport helicopters as well as gunships to do an airborne assault. They can reach the 2 airports within 10 to 15 minutes.
They can do that by parking them in international waters. And Taiwan would feel constrained from firing first because that would be seen as provoking a war.
You're going to have these transport ships, mostly civilian vessels, and have been loaded with hundreds of thousands of troops, armored vehicles, tanks, logistics that you need to occupy an island of 23 million people.
To cover the attackers, Alperovich says, China would strike Taiwan's defenses from afar.
You're going to have bombers launched from the mainland. You're going to have the largest cruise missile and ballistic missile and rocket forces in the world, pummeling fixed radar installations, pummeling naval facilities, pummeling communication nodes.
Then, he predicts, Chinese Marines in huge airboats would rush up the river leading to the center of the capital city, Taipei.
All of this can happen literally within the first 30 minutes of action.
All the while, he says, the U.S. president facing an awful choice. Allow the aggression to stand or launch a war that could kill more Americans than World War II. So why is Taiwan so vital to U.S. and global interests? One reason, Taiwan manufactures almost 70% of the world's semiconductors, those tiny boards used in everything from phones and laptops to life-saving medical devices and the vast server networks that power American industry. And if China invades, experts say, the U.S. or Taiwan is likely to destroy those factories, which would spell economic disaster for much of the world. Or if China manages to capture the factories and keep them operational, it would leap ahead in the world's most important technologies. Alperovich says that would harm American prosperity and security. But so would a war with China.
In the first year of that war, global depression right off the bat.
And that assumes it doesn't go nuclear.
That's right.
Intelligence agencies and military leaders have been warning for years that China is working on plans to seize Taiwan by force. The admiral in charge of U.S. Pacific Command told Congress in March that, quote, all indications point to the People's Liberation Army meeting Xi Jinping's alleged goal of potentially invading Taiwan by 2027.
We haven't faced a threat like this since World War II.
China has spent the last 2 decades modernizing its military to be able to destroy American ships in the Pacific.
You're going to lose ships. You're going to lose a lot of sailors. You're going to lose thousands, potentially even tens of thousands of American troops.
Alperovich says the U.S. must make containing China the focus of its foreign policy.
The United States has to make it clear to them that the cost of this conflict are going to be too huge for the Chinese economy.
He says that means ending U.S. reliance on China for things like critical minerals and solar panels. And it means arming Taiwan in a way that would make an invasion much more painful than it would be today. All to influence the calculations of the Chinese president.
We want him to wake up every single day and look at himself in the mirror as he's shaving and say, today is not the day.
Our thanks to Ken for that report. And a delegation of American lawmakers is in Taiwan, pledging further U.S. support as part of a trip to the island. Well, let's get you more international headlines now. North Korea's attempt to launch a second spy satellite has failed. NBC News International correspondent Claudio Lavanga joins us from Rome with that and more. Hey, Claudio, good morning.
Good morning, Savannah. That's right. According to KCNA, the North Korean state media, a rocket launched to deploy the country's second spy satellite has exploded shortly after liftoff on Monday. Now, KCNA said the rocket blew up during the first stage of the flight due to a suspected engine problem. The failed launch came hours after leaders of South Korea, China and Japan met in Seoul for the first trilateral meeting in more than 4 years. At the time of the launch, Japan urged residents in the southern territory of Okinawa to take shelter, and Japan's defense ministry called the launch a challenge to the entire world. And let's come back to this part of the world, to the Vatican, where, according to Italian media, Pope Francis used an offensive gay slur during a closed-door meeting with bishops. Italian media say that during that discussion, the Pope objected to admitting gay men to seminaries, saying that while it is important to embrace everyone, it was likely that a gay man could risk leading a double life. Two sources who were at that meeting confirmed to NBC News the Pope used a derogatory term in Italian when he referred to homosexuals. Now, the Vatican has not responded yet to a request for comment by NBC News. Now, let's end this tour of the world in Britain, where one of the country and possibly the world's most extreme annual event took place, cheese rolling. Daredevil competitors chased 7-pound wheels of cheese down a near vertical hill near Gloucester in southwest England. The competition has been a spectator's favorite since 1826, but this year the race was made even more difficult and dangerous by the rain that made the hill even more slippery than usual. Now, as always, very few competitors managed to stay on their feet until the end. Those who didn't and rolled down the hill were caught at the bottom of the hill by the local rugby team. Now, I wonder, Savannah, whether at the end the winner was asked to say cheese for that trophy picture. Back to you.
Good one, Claudio. Thank you very much. Coming up, experts say mule deer on California's Catalina Island are wreaking havoc on the island's ecosystem by eating all the native plants. We're going to take a look at the problem and the controversial solution. That's up next. Welcome back. A mother is speaking out after 3 of her daughters were stabbed while in a theater watching a movie. As NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk reports, that terrifying incident is just one of several violent crimes the suspect might be connected to.
Her daughters were at the movies on Saturday night when Lisa Dembowski got the call.
I needed to get to the AMC movie theater right away because they had been stabbed.
According to authorities, Jared Reviza attacked Dembowski's 3 daughters and a friend with a knife in their seats, unprovoked.
My oldest was leaned over to get something. He got her in the back, and then my other daughter in the top chest, and then my last daughter across her arm.
The girls, ages 9 to 17, sustained non-life-threatening injuries. An hour later, police say 26-year-old Reviza, who lives on the wealthy island of Martha's Vineyard, went to a rest stop McDonald's, stabbing one employee in the drive-thru and another inside. According to authorities, Reviza fled in his black Porsche SUV, which he crashed. He was then arrested. Multiple law enforcement sources tell NBC Boston the stabbings may be connected to a death investigation in Connecticut. So far, Reviza faces multiple charges, including assault with intent to murder. Dembowski says her daughters are physically okay, but definitely rattled.
I think it's a pretty sick individual to harm children.
Our thanks to Stephanie Gosk for that report. Well, the suspect is expected to be in court today. He's set to face multiple charges, including assault with intent to murder. Well, mule deer have become a local staple on Catalina Island, that's off the coast of California, since they were introduced a century ago. But now there is a plan to eradicate them because of the damage they are causing to plants. NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin takes a closer look at the problem.
Catalina Island's charming coastal town, population 3,300, attracts more than 1 million visitors each year to take in relaxing small-town vibes in rolling hills.
Located just 26 miles off the coast of California, most people reach Catalina by ferry.
We're getting a guided tour of what ecologists say is a concerning threat to the island's ecological future: mule deer. The deer were brought to the island for hunting about 100 years ago and have overpopulated to nearly 2,000, according to the Catalina Island Conservancy.
This is the uninhabited interior of the island, where Conservancy officials say deer have wreaked havoc on the ecosystem by eating native plants,
which makes room for invasive dry grasses to grow that could become a fire hazard.
Unfortunately, recent events like those that took place in Lahaina, Hawaii, are a really stark reminder of the importance of proactive conservation efforts, and that's what we're doing here.
Lauren Dinhard is the island's Senior Director of Conservation. She pointed out examples along our journey.
This is one of the plants that the deer don't eat, and even though it's green right now, it's soon going to turn all into this. This is going to be a plant that could catch on fire very, very easily.
In parts of the island, the Conservancy built these exclosures to keep deer away from those vital plants that capture much-needed moisture.
Wow. So this is a lot different from what we saw outside of this.
Here, there are noticeably bigger and more diverse plants.
They smell like grape Jolly Ranchers.
That does smell like a Jolly Rancher. No wonder they're called deer candy.
Yeah, exactly.
Experts say the rest of the island could look like this if the deer were gone.
It would just be one action that changes the fate of the island forever.
But the action they want to take includes shooting deer from helicopters. Several other communities have completed or are considering similar moves that have caused growing debate, like the feral hogs in South Carolina that have caused millions in damages to homes, riverbanks, and golf courses, and Idaho's wolf population that have killed cattle and profits from ranchers. In Catalina, residents say the deer have become part of their community and believe killing them is inhumane.
If somebody's out there hiking and they're going to shoot from helicopters, how are you going to protect those people? The life of a plant is never going to be more important to me than the life of a living creature.
If approved, Conservancy officials have said that hunting would occur in the interior of the island away from people.
It's uncomfortable, but humans are responsible for this situation.
Dr. Winston Vickers, who has been involved in other eradication programs, says the most humane way is the quickest.
We sometimes have to grow up and put on our big person pants and do the things that are difficult.
The California Department of Fish and Wildlife will ultimately decide if the Conservancy can kill the deer. In a statement to NBC News, CDFW says it is waiting for additional submissions from the Conservancy before any decision on issuing the permit is made. Hunting is allowed on the island 6 months out of the year, but officials say it's still not enough to tackle the issue. Opponents have suggested sterilization and transporting the deer off island, but Conservancy officials say trying to catch them could trigger capture myopathy.
Capture myopathy is a disease. It creates a condition where they essentially get so stressed out they can die from it. It's a really painful and stressful death.
The deer may have captured the hearts of residents, but in a world of accelerated climate change, these cute four-legged friends will likely be sacrificed to preserve the island for generations to come. Dana Griffin, NBC News.
All right, still ahead, swimming with the sharks. Beachgoers and lifeguards from coast to coast are on alert after a slight uptick in shark sightings. We'll tell you about the new warning from marine experts and why they say this is a trend they expect to see all summer long. That's up next. We are back now with a very early start to shark season. Over Memorial Day weekend, shark sightings forced several popular beaches to close. And experts say it's a trend they expect to see all summer long. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock joins us now from Hobie Beach in Miami with more on this. Hey, Sam, good morning.
Hi, Savannah. Good morning. Look, the number of unprovoked attacks globally last year did edge up slightly with 69. It does kind of sound like a lot, but there's a couple of things of concern this morning. One on the West Coast, as you mentioned, San Clemente beaches closed after a surfer was bumped by a shark. That happened over the Memorial Day holiday. Then at the same time, on the East Coast, a warning from the New England Aquarium saying that white sharks right now are migrating to the Northeast, and they have already seen white shark activity.
As beachgoers across the country begin to soak up the warmer weather on the sand and in the sea.
Yeah, we're at the beach for the start of the summer, right?
Marine experts have fresh warnings about the rare but potential dangers that could be lurking beneath the water. Right before the holiday weekend, a flag from the New England Aquarium urging the public to be aware of their surroundings. After reports of multiple marine mammals found with white shark bites off of Massachusetts coastline.
It is very much a wild environment anytime you're entering the ocean.
Unprovoked shark attacks and fatalities are up worldwide. The U.S. had 36 such attacks last year, accounting for more than half of the 69 incidents across the globe, and a jump from the average of 63 the previous 5 years.
If you are swimming in an area where there are large sharks feeding on large prey items, you know there's an element of risk.
The state of Florida experienced 16 unprovoked shark bites in 2023, at least double any other state.
Swim near the lifeguard because we can tell you what's going on, what's safe around that area.
Earlier this month, researchers captured footage of a rare white shark swimming about 30 miles off the coast of Alabama, the first known sighting in that area recorded by scientists. Groups like OSearch have been tagging sharks for research purposes and also for real-time updates about the predator's whereabouts. Last month, 2 white sharks pinged off the Atlantic coast of Florida, the sharks appearing to head north for the summer season.
Water has sharks in it, but I mean, we've been swimming here for years. I think everybody will be safe this summer.
While in New York, drones now deployed to spot sharks from above in the hopes of taking a bite out of potential attacks. Last month, 24-year-old Marlon Wakeman was bitten by 2 sharks in a marina in the Bahamas after slipping off a fishing boat into the water.
He grabbed my left leg, kind of pulled me into the water, and at that point, my head went underwater.
He's since recovered from his injuries, but Wakeman knows how lucky he is to be alive.
They can and will kill you. I got very lucky.
We did mention that fatalities, guys, are also up this year. It doubled from 10 from 5, but there's also annual fluctuations when it comes to that. And there was a cluster in Australia where surfers specifically had been surfing in an area where there was an aggregation of white sharks, 3 deaths as a result. Definitely something to keep at the top of your mind. Surfers are at more danger than just regular swimmers.
Oh, yeah.
Back
Sam, what else? What else can keep us safe?
Okay, so common sense will always, Savannah, keep you safe. Try to swim with a friend, right? So you have a buddy system that's in place. Don't swim at dawn or dusk. Try to avoid schools of fish or where people are fishing. And also avoid shiny jewelry because then sharks can mistake you for a fish, which is absolutely something that you do not want to see transpire. But obviously, and I need to say this as a caveat, the numbers are exceedingly low for people being involved in unprovoked shark attacks. Back to you, Savannah.
Always a good reminder when we start doing these stories. Sam Brock, thank you very much. Great to see you. Now let's get to what's making financial headlines. A tech firm in Virginia is facing heavy fines from the Justice Department after posting a job opening for whites only. CNBC's Savannah Hanau joins us with that and more. Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning to you. So the Justice Department has fined a tech company in Northern Virginia after it posted a job listing seeking white candidates. The ad, which was posted last year, quickly spread on social media, drawing widespread criticism. The Justice Department says the ad deterred qualified people, including U.S. citizens born outside the U.S. and non-citizens, from applying. The company has apologized, saying an employee added the discriminatory language and published the listing without authorization. Google is rolling out a new feature for the Android YouTube Music app that's part Shazam and part when you ask, what's that song that goes like? Now, the feature lets you hum, whistle, sing, or play a recording of a song to figure out what it's called. You'll see a waveform icon next to the microphone icon that appears when you tap the search button in the app. It will start listening, and experts say it does come up with fairly accurate answers. And Amazon Fresh is cutting prices by up to 30% on 4,000 items in store and online. The markdowns will rotate weekly. Amazon Fresh joins a list of retailers reducing prices recently, including Target and Walmart. They're trying to lure inflation-weary consumers to spend more freely on both essential items such as food and more discretionary purchases such as clothing and home decor. Savannah.
All right, Savannah Hanau, thank you very much.
We got it.
Well, Memorial Day weekend marks kind of like the unofficial start of summer generally, and also the summer movie season in Hollywood. But the films that were supposed to be red hot turned out to be much cooler than expected. Early predictions show ticket sales down 40% compared to this time last year. And Furiosa, the new Mad Max movie, it had the worst Memorial Day weekend release in 43 years. Let's bring in Paul Dergarabedian for more. He's the senior media analyst at Comscore. Paul, good morning. Great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. So, I mean, first, just are you surprised by this start to the movie season and what we just saw this past weekend?
Well, Savannah, I'm definitely not happy about it. I mean, this was such a low-grossing Memorial weekend, and typically, like last year, we had a movie, The Little Mermaid, opened to $118 million. The year before that, Top Gun Maverick opened on Memorial Weekend to $160 million. This year, we have Furiosa at around $32 million. The Garfield movie at around $31.1 million, right around $31 million. And so the overall weekend was $128 million, according to our Comscore numbers. That's well down from what is typical, which is generally over $200 million domestically for a Memorial weekend. But there's a lot of factors as to why this happened.
Yeah, why do you think? What could be behind the low turnout this weekend?
Well, it was a combination. You know, this is a very fragile ecosystem, the movie business. And, you know, when you don't have a big movie at the beginning of the year, for instance, a year ago in January, Avatar: The Way of Water was huge and generated tons of interest in going to the movies. April last year had the Super Mario Brothers movie, which generated $490 million by itself in April. That was a great lead into May, which is when the summer starts. This year, the big opener for the beginning of summer was The Fall Guy with about $27.8 million. That was a fairly low grossing kickoff to the summer, where we've generally had Marvel movies kicking off summer. In fact, between 2007 and 2019, a Marvel movie kicked off every one of those summers. Last year, indeed, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 opened the summer with $118 million. So naturally, there's not as much momentum right now, but all is not lost. There's some big movies on the way. So I think the box office will definitely recover.
This is the first summer movie season since we saw those strikes last year in Hollywood that obviously had such an impact on the industry as a whole. Do you think that seeing that, the pause that there was, the concessions that had to be made, is playing any part in this?
I think so. I mean, the release calendar is very important. The way the films line up in theaters, you know, on those release dates is very important. That got thrown into a bit of disarray naturally because of the strikes. I don't want to put this all in the strikes, but definitely when you move movies around the chessboard that is the release calendar, it can have a big impact. Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning Part 2, moving to next year. Deadpool and Wolverine was going to open on May 3rd, and is going to be released in late July 27, which I think will be a huge movie, and we'll be singing a different song at that point because we'll be in an up mood. Despicable Me 4, Inside Out 2, Twisters, I think are all big potential hits for this summer.
Of course, there's also streaming. Do you think that maybe people are not heading to the theaters because they're just waiting to watch them at home? Where, I mean, I will say, for example, I have not seen Challengers in theaters yet, and I just realized that it came out streaming, and I was like, oh, that would be kind of fun. I actually noticed it's like $20 or something to stream it at home, so I'm like, that's not really saving versus 2 tickets at the movie. But in some cases, it means it's cheaper. Maybe you spend less on concessions and all that kind of stuff. Do you think people wait for that?
I think sometimes it really depends on the movie. For a movie like Dune Part 2, people did not want to wait because that movie begs to be seen on that big screen. Denis Villeneuve directing last year, Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan. You've got to see that in the movie theater. I think audiences love going to the movie theater. They've just become very selective because they have so many options. So I think streaming actually helps theaters because it just gets people excited about going to movies. And like you mentioned, at the beginning when films first hit home video, and while they're still in theaters, they're pretty expensive. So if you can go get that same experience, well, a better experience, in my opinion, on the big screen, why not? But yeah, there's a lot of options out there for entertainment, no question.
As we look ahead, I'm not an expert, but I think, is the next kind of big period where you think, oh, is this weekend going to be good for the theaters? Maybe like holiday time, Thanksgiving, Christmas time. How's the season looking then?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Savannah, because I think there's some huge movies. Beetlejuice, the next Joker movie, the next Venom, Gladiator, Wicked, Moana. I mean, the movies just keep on coming. There's a Lion King movie and Sonic the Hedgehog 3. So the end of the year, I think it's going to be more of a mid-loaded year and a back-loaded year because I think the holiday season is going to be huge, and that'll lead into a strong 2025. When we're sitting here a year from now, we'll be saying, wow, the box office is way up this Memorial Weekend versus 24. So that's the ebb and flow of the business.
Paul Dergarabedian, thank you so much for joining us. An interesting conversation, and now I do want to go to the movies. Maybe I'll go this week. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you.
Good to see you. Coming up, a final journey home. An American hero is finally laid to rest after he went missing in action during the attack on Pearl Harbor more than 80 years ago. We'll tell you how advances in technology help bring peace to his family and the other families of fallen service members. Stay with us. You're watching Morning News Now. Okay, this is so cool. This is an act of kindness that made one Coldplay fan's wildest dreams come true. Sandra Glenn, who has osteoarthritis, was struggling to walk to the venue where the band was playing at a festival in England. Well, a Mercedes stopped to give her a ride, and get this, sitting inside was Chris Martin, the lead singer. The 64-year-old shared this cute picture of them riding together. It's so cute. She later told the BBC she had been considering turning around and watching the concert from home. Once they made it to the venue, she says Martin made sure she was taken care of. I mean, how great is that? All right, we're going to end this hour with a heartfelt story of one soldier's journey home. NBC News Pentagon correspondent Courtney Kuby explains how new technology identified the remains of Starring Winfield, who went missing in action after the attack on Pearl Harbor more than 80 years ago.
Growing up in California in the 1920s, Starring Winfield and his siblings were inseparable.
He always looked out for his sisters, older or younger, and they were all very close.
Adam Morrill's grandmother was Starring's sister. She always used to brag about her baby brother, the war hero.
We were always told stories when we were kids.
Starring enlisted in the Navy in 1940 and was assigned to the USS Oklahoma. On leave, he married his high school sweetheart before heading to Pearl Harbor. 6 weeks later, she would be a widow. On December 7, 1941, during a surprise attack, Japanese torpedoes sunk the Oklahoma, killing 429 U.S. sailors and Marines and leaving 388 listed as unaccounted for, including Starring.
He was missing in action, presumed dead.
2 years later, the Navy righted the ship, and the remains of those who could not be identified were buried together. Then, in 2015, armed with new advances in DNA identification, the military disinterred the remains, beginning the painstaking effort to identify the fallen service members.
We have an obligation as a nation to not leave them behind. And so this is that fulfillment of that promise.
Returning the remains of 361 men to their families. Radioman Third Class starring Winfield was one of them, receiving full honors as he was finally laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery earlier this month.
We're being more about a celebration of him. He's finally getting this lasting monument and a place of just honor.
A final salute for an American hero, a poignant farewell for his proud family. Courtney Kuby, NBC News, Arlington National Cemetery.
What a way to remember. Our thank you to Courtney for that report. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now. Stay with us, though. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.